Hey, welcome everybody. It's time for some real assurance, some real support, some real advice, and some real conversations about the real insurance you really need to protect and grow your business today. With the real deal, Mr. Insurance himself, Eddy Canavan. Hey, Eddy.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Well, today, we just got you in the room here today. You're in the hot seat because
I
I
am.
want to know what's going on with all these laws and changes and everything here. Any ideas? Do you have any updates on the legislative nonsense that seems to change everything every month here?
I absolutely do. The California legislation just ended their session, and a few bills that will absolutely impact small to medium-sized businesses have either been passed and signed by Governor Newsom or are currently on his desk for review. I have some colleagues in Sacramento, and the bills that I'm going to review today, they feel have a high potential to be passed and be put in place January.
So
And
will some of them shock us? Will we say, oh my goodness, they're going to do that? Or are we going to say, oh, thank goodness they're doing that?
no, I think it's the former.
We're not going to get yippee. I'm glad they're doing that.
So from a workers' compensation perspective, I would say for the last 20 years, we've had some very positive reform. Governor Schwarzenegger, that was his platform.
Yeah.
You might recall Costco having you sign a petition when you would go into their stores.
I do,
To reform workers' compensation. Governor Brown did a substantive reform. All these things really shored up and helped contain costs. We seem to be rolling back a bit. And so during my podcast today, I'm going to talk about some of the bills that are concerning me and how I think this might impact small to medium-sized businesses.
Okay, well, we need some real assurance that somebody's watching this on our behalf here.
So first I want to talk about the Fast Food Accountability and Standards Act.
Oh boy, we have talked about that so much in this station here.
So Assembly Bill 257 was signed into law by Governor Newsom and is going to go into effect in the new year. And this has been a very hot topic for a long time. On the news, you'll see restaurant workers picketing and protesting and stating that they're not getting paid enough, that they have unsafe work conditions. So this assembly bill will apply to fast food chains consisting of 100 or more establishments nationally that share a common brand. So if you have 3 restaurants in California, this is not going to be a bill that you have to be worried about. But if you're a franchise owner, if you own Subways, if you own Del Tacos or McDonald's, this is definitely something that you need to be concerned about. It's going to create a fast food sector council within the California Department of Industrial Relations to include a 10-member council of fast food workers, franchisees, franchisors, advocates for fast food employees, and representatives from Governor Newsom's office that he will appoint. They are going to meet and talk about establishing standards around working hours, working conditions, trying to improve working conditions for fast food employees. And it's going to raise the minimum wage for fast food workers to $22 an hour.
Wow.
But it will also include a cost of living increase, an annual cost of living increase, or what you call a COLA adjustment. And that cannot exceed 3.5%, but it also could be based on the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners. So it's going to be a hot topic for a while, in that, people that want to start a franchise, people that currently are franchise owners, this is definitely going to impact them. It also protects employees from retaliation when filing a complaint with this council or refusing to perform work that would violate public health and safety laws. Now, I think the reason why they baked that in is really because of COVID. Because, people will come in and say, hey, I'm immunocompromised. I have somebody at home that's immunocompromised. I can't work in this sort of condition. I need to be in the back with a mask on, and I can't be out and about in the restaurant, in the dining room around customers.
And you can't fire me or retaliate.
You cannot fire me,
right.
and you cannot retaliate.
Right.
So I see this, again, creating a lot of, it's going to create litigation. You definitely want to knock on your human resources department's door to talk about this. A lot of franchisees rely on their payroll companies to supply these sorts of services to them. You want to have a conversation with them. You want to find out what they advise, what they recommend, and you want to put these things in place as soon as you can and before this law goes into effect.
But you're talking about an uncertain future, and so how do I protect for uncertainty?
You just have to be prepared. You have to be prepared. You have to think through the possible outcomes and try to do as much as you can to put things in place to mitigate
To be
those
proactive
circumstances.
and not just react, not just wait and see what happens and then react to it.
Right. And you're never going to stop every loss. You're never going to stop every exposure. But if you can really show your good faith attempts to try to circumvent some of this stuff,
Yeah, right.
that's what you need to make sure you're doing.
Okay. All right. Big one. We've heard people talking about that. That's the 800-pound gorilla in the room here that's going to change the way fast food works in Southern California, or at least in California.
Yes, absolutely. This next bill has not been passed, has not been signed by Governor Newsom. It's been passed by the legislature. It's on his desk. You know, he could sign it, he could veto it. Again, the colleagues that I know in Sacramento feel that the governor will sign this bill, and this is going to cause a lot of issues for employers. This is the Discrimination in Employment and Use of Cannabis bill. So this is a bill that they want their cake and they want to eat it too. As you know, in California, marijuana is legal recreationally. It's legal medicinally. Anybody over 21 years of age can walk into a dispensary and you can buy marijuana. You can consume marijuana. What this bill says is that an employer cannot discriminate against an employee for using cannabis when they're not at work. But the reason why they want their cake and eat it too is because the California Fair Employment and Housing Act, as well as the American Disabilities Act, they're emphatic. They are not vague. It is not gray. They state that an employer, under no circumstances, has to condone, allow use of an illicit, controlled substance. Marijuana is still a Class 1 drug, according to the federal.
Class 1, too.
Class 1 drug.
That's like cocaine or heroin. No, I think cocaine is lower. I think it's like heroin or something.
It's heroin, it's mescaline. These are bad drugs. So given the fact that it's still a Class 1 illicit substance.
This is federally. Yeah.
Federally.
Right.
This bill states that an employer can still pre-screen, drug screen, to hire. They can make decisions based on a pre-hire drug screen. And they can also still drug screen employees based on their internal policies. So let's say you own a Pizza Huts, and you have people driving and delivering pizzas. And somebody gets into an accident, and it's their fault. And you feel they got into the accident because they're impaired. You have a reasonable suspicion that they're impaired. When that happens, OSHA allows you to drug screen them. So what this law states is that you can still do that, but the only way that you can fire them is if they test positive for THC. Now, marijuana is becoming more popular, so people are starting to become more aware of what the drug is and how it works. But you know, you can take CBD, which has little to no THC in it.
Right.
And the debate and the studies show that you have these cannabinoids in your body where the CBD interacts with it, and it's supposed to help with anxiety and pain and depression and sleep and all these things. So if you
anti-inflammatory too. We've had a lot of shows talking about it. CBD has been adopted for a lot of people for anti-inflammatory properties. You work out or you have a pain or something.
That's absolutely right. So if they're drug screened and they test positive for those types of substances, then you cannot terminate them.
So it's just the THC, which is the one element that separates marijuana from hemp. Hemp doesn't have THC in it,
Right.
Whereas and CBD doesn't. CBD oil and CBD products, it's a THC component that gets you high.
And the bill actually states psychoactive component, which is THC.
Can I ask a question though?
Yeah.
Because we've had some people talk about this one. We've done some shows on. We're a business channel, but there's a lot of the business of cannabis is booming here. And one of the questions they have is, unlike alcohol, which goes out of your system pretty quickly. I used to own a bar. I think it's 1 hour per every ounce of alcohol you consume, or some kind of ratio like that. So you take a drink, you wait a couple hours, it goes out of your system. THC can hang around for days.
Correct.
So you might not really even be high anymore, but the compound hasn't flushed out of your system, hasn't gone away. So the argument would be, I didn't do that today. I did that yesterday.
It's impairment versus utilization.
Right.
That's the problem. I speak about marijuana use across the country. I have for many, many years. And it's interesting how each state does it a little differently. California was the first state to legalize medicinal marijuana based on it wasn't a Senate bill. It was a what's the term?
Proposition.
Thank you. It was a proposition.
Right.
So that's how marijuana became legal medicinally in California, and it's just evolved since then. And the reason why this bill is coming into effect is because there's more and more people using marijuana, so they want to protect employees from retaliation when employers find out from their friends or whomever that, hey, you know that they use marijuana.
Right.
And so, okay, I'll drug screen them, and then I can fire them because they'll have THC in their system because it's
Right.
stored in your fat cells and it's there for a long time. I always say that if you have to have somebody drive you to the hospital, if you have to call an ambulance on Monday to take you to the hospital, do you want the guy that drank the 12 pack on Sunday, or do you want the guy that smoked the joint on Friday?
I don't. You ask, that's a tough question. I really don't know. I don't want him to do either, probably, but
I would probably want the guy that smoked the joint on Friday because he's not going to be impaired, but the guy that drank the 12 pack the day before is going to be hungover.
yeah, that's true.
So, but if that ambulance driver gets into an accident, the guy that smoked the joint that's not impaired is going to get fired.
yeah,
The guy that drank the 12 pack is going to test fine.
right.
The alcohol is going to
He's
be out of his system.
hungover, but the alcohol's out of his system.
Exactly.
Right. He can't function, but the alcohol doesn't show up in the screen. Whereas that's what the point I was making is that
Right.
the THC is still there. What's the life of THC? Does anybody know? How fast does it go out of your body? You say it gets stored in your fat cells or whatever.
So the marijuana is stored in your fat cells, but the psychoactive effect
Component.
of marijuana can last for hours. It can last, I think, up to 12 hours.
But even though that effect has diminished, the compound that caused it is still in your body.
That's correct.
And that's the confusion. I find it 2 days later still in your body and say, see, you had THC in your system, I'm going to fire you. And you say, I did that Friday. Well, how are you
Right.
going to prove that?
Right. And there's also, from a workers' compensation perspective, there are 6 states in the country that currently require carriers and employers to reimburse those injured on the job to use marijuana to treat their work-related injury. It started in New Mexico, and they actually have a fee schedule where employers are required to pay up to $11,000 a year to reimburse injured workers for purchasing marijuana. Now, why do they have to reimburse
Yeah.
the injured worker? Because marijuana is federally illegal, and a carrier cannot pay a dispensary directly to buy marijuana. Now, in California, they tried to do the same thing in California, but California stated that because of the fact that it is an illicit controlled substance and that the California Health and Safety Act prohibits a healthcare provider to pay for an illicit controlled substance, that a workers' compensation carrier, from that perspective, is a healthcare provider, and they are not required to reimburse an injured worker in California for using marijuana to treat their work-related injury.
All the more reason you need to be very careful about how you treat workman's comp issues revolving around marijuana.
Right. The one thing that this bill does state, though, is that it outlines that you do not have to permit the use of marijuana at the workplace.
Clearly.
It still allows you to have a drug-free workplace. You still can enforce federal laws, meaning that you do not have to condone any use of marijuana for an employee that's involved in construction, where they're required to have a background check required by the federal government. Anybody that's receiving federal funding, anyone that
Like hospitals.
like
right?
hospitals, schools,
Right.
federal licensed related benefits, or you're entering into a federal contract. Because again, it's federally illegal. This is the one thing that's keeping ADA and these other things in place of not having to condone marijuana in certain circumstances, is because it's federally illegal.
Right.
There was a bill that was considered this year by the Assembly. They passed it. It went to the Senate, a congressional bill, went to the Senate, and the Senate did not do anything with it, but it was going to go ahead and reclassify marijuana and then technically make it illegal
Right. On a
substance.
federal level. Right.
Right.
Wow. All right. We'll have to watch that one and see how that one plays out.
It's going to create a lot of litigation.
Anything else? We got about 5 or 10 minutes left here.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about licensed clinical social workers. So because of COVID and the pandemic, there is a need for the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder. So this law is currently on Governor Newsom's desk, and what it would do is it would basically state that licensed clinical social workers are physicians for the purpose of treating these conditions. And employers need to be aware of this because in California, your carrier has what is called a medical provider network. This is a network of physicians that you can direct care to
Right.
treat a work-related injury. So these licensed clinical social workers, this bill will allow those licensed clinical social workers to be placed in these networks. So you really want to have a conversation with your broker and figure out what your carrier or your claims administrator is going to do with this bill if it passes, and they can have licensed clinical social workers brought in.
Here's the question I have on all of this stuff. is ignorance of the law any excuse? I know it isn't, but just to say, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Right. No, it's never an excuse.
Because I think that's what most of us rely on. Something comes up and you say, I didn't know that. I
Right.
didn't know I couldn't do this. I didn't know I could do this. And then they go, well, sorry, the employee's attorney sure did,
Right.
or the employee did, or somebody did.
Right.
And therefore you're out.
The issue with laws is that they're always well intended. Like this law is well intended. If it's signed by Newsom, it's well intended because there's a need.
Mm-hmm.
There's a need. But the problem is that for large employers, not small to medium sized employers, because they're mostly in a medical provider network, their carriers put these things in place.
Right.
But large employers that do not have these networks, the injured worker could end up going to these physicians directly. And that's going to be a problem because they could end up taking them off work. It could be extended. It's going to increase costs. And that trickles down to small and medium-sized businesses in regards to premium, and in regards just to overall insurance costs.
All the more that you really need to find not just any broker who will give you the best price, but who really understands the complexities of these things if you're in a business that might have some of these issues arise.
Right. That's what I pride myself on with Alta Claims and Insurance Services is that, placing insurance is not complicated. You get licensed, you become affiliated with carriers, you shop the market, you try to get the best premium. The rubber hits the road when you have a loss.
Yeah.
And then understanding these issues and understanding how to maneuver them and navigate, hold the carrier accountable, I think that's really what you want your broker to be able to do.
And too much of us just think it's price shopping. I
Right.
need this, I want this, just get me the cheapest deal, and then I'm done, and I never talk to my broker again until I need to buy something else.
Right. The last bill I want to mention, because this one really is very important to all employers, small, medium-sized, large employers, is in California, as you probably know, Paul, there's a work-related presumption with COVID-19. So if you have 4 or more employees at your work site that get sick within 14 days of each other, then it's presumed to have happened at work. This bill, this presumption,
I didn't know that. Okay.
yeah. So this presumption was to expire this year. It's going to be extended another year, and the bill's on Newsom's desk. He is going to sign it, and so then we'll have another year of this COVID presumption. So 4 more people in the same work site get sick within 14 days, or 4% if you have 100 or more people at a work site. Why this is onerous for employers is a couple things. One is that they're going to be required for another year to report every positive COVID case to their carrier or third-party administrator. They also have to report how many people are at the work site. The carrier or third-party administrator, they're the ones that are held accountable to determine if a quote outbreak has occurred at the work site. That doesn't mean that the claim is automatically filed, the claim is automatically accepted. The individual still has to assert that they got sick at work. But if they assert that they got sick at work, then it's presumed to have happened at work. And why that is important is because it flips.
Say that again, because I understand how you're breaking it down. I'm
Yeah.
not sure my head's breaking it down here.
Right.
So if we're talking about people that get COVID primarily,
Right.
And if they say, I think I got sick at work, then the law assumes that's happened if there have been 3 or more people similarly got sick within 14 days.
That's correct. It's 4 or more within 14 days. It's presumed.
So whether it happened or not, the law assumes that
It's a presumption, yeah.
but it starts with they got to make a claim.
They have to make a claim.
And then there has to be some supporting evidence, like other people getting sick, and then that's it. We don't have to look any further. That's it.
So the carrier then, their job is they have to prove that it didn't happen on the job. So they can do that in 2 ways. One is contact tracing. So when this individual called in sick and said, hey, I got COVID, the first question the employer should say or ask is, how did you get it? I think I got it at the birthday party, or I think I got it from my wife or whatever, right?
People will inadvertently tell you what they think, right?
You got to document that, right? The second thing is the carrier has to do what they call a social media check. And so they go on to these individuals' social media. And if they see them at the barbecue or they see them at the party and they see them at the
concert
mass,
last night,
right?
Yeah.
If they can demonstrate these 2 things, then they can still deny that it happened at work. Absent being able to find these things, again, it's presumed that it happened on the job.
So what's the net effect to an employer who somebody makes a claim, other people have gotten sick, Does that mean that then your carrier has to pay for these COVID-related illnesses, and then that's a cost to you? That's a claim against you?
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct. It affects what you call your experience modification. It affects your premium. COVID is insidious. And what I'm concerned with COVID is long COVID.
Yeah.
So,
Me too.
we have a presumed COVID case. Maybe they're out for a couple weeks. Maybe they have minimal symptoms, but then 2 years later, they come back and say, I can't breathe now. And I think it's because I had COVID 2 years ago. That's what really concerns me with these COVID presumptions.
I'm with you, because long COVID, we talk about it a little bit on the station, but this idea they really don't know. People seem to be foggy. It certainly affects your lungs. It goes into your lungs.
Right.
And maybe it even affects your heart and makes your heart weaker over time. Right now, it seems to clear up. That's kind of the assumption. You might stay foggy. You might have a diminished capacity for a little while, but it didn't do any permanent damage. But we don't know. This is going to take years to figure this out.
That's right.
And is this something then that people are suddenly filing claims 2 years from now? I got COVID at your business because we determined that, or you didn't fight it or prove otherwise. And now you're in it for the long haul. You've got to take care of this condition through your policy for years, maybe.
So I present at industry conferences around the country. I presented at a conference in Dana Point a couple days ago, and the question was, is COVID our new asbestos?
That's what I was just thinking of. Asbestos. It took years to find this underlying problem.
Mesothelioma, it was because I worked around asbestos 20 years ago, and pulmonary issues in workers' compensation to establish permanent impairment that then equates to a dollar amount.
Right.
Pulmonary and respiratory issues in workers' compensation are very subjective. You go to a physician and they say, breathe into this tube.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, or I give minimal effort.
Or it hurts. I can't do it. Right.
Or I could be found with a 50% permanent impairment that equates to a large amount of money. This is what I feel is coming down the pike. I feel like this is on its way. And what I've recommended to clients is they need to talk to their carrier about their COVID strategy. They need to have a COVID strategy.
Wow.
And if they don't, then I will give them one. And I recommend that they fully settle these claims. In California, it's called a compromise release. You give somebody an amount of money and you fully resolve the claim. So with COVID,
that's it. You've signed off. I've took care of this.
Yeah.
We're good forever, right?
We're good. Yeah. Because then you're limiting your exposure, and you're minimizing it, and then you do not have to stay awake at night worrying about
5 years later.
Long COVID.
Hundreds of people are going to show up and say, "I got COVID 5 years ago, and
That's
now
right.
I have this new discovered condition."
That's right.
Well, I think it leads to one conclusion, and that is, we need good advice. We need people who are more than just price shoppers. We need strategists on our team here, and I wonder how many brokers are strategists or are just shopping for the best price.
Right. Yeah. And again, my team, we pride ourselves on the fact that we hold carriers accountable. We are applying critical thought to these issues, and we're providing strategies and advice to both our clients and to the carriers.
Well, my advice is come back and listen to the show each and every time here, because you've already given me 3 or 4 ideas I hadn't thought about at all. Long COVID, the new asbestos. Oh, my goodness here. All right. How do they reach you if they want to learn more about some of these issues and talk through it, maybe talk about a strategy? Absolutely.
So you can find us at our website, betterwithalta.com. That's betterwithalta, ALTA.com. You can also reach us at 877-ALTA-111, or you can email me, Eddy, at altaclaimsservices.com. That's EDDY at altaclaimsservices.com.
Okay. Well, wow. I hope you'll come back and talk about each of these issues in greater detail, because now I got to go look them up and think about them. You've raised an awareness and made me sounded an alarm bell on things I hadn't ever even heard about or thought about here today. All right. Thanks for coming in. I don't know. I'm going to be a little scared here today. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, there you have it. If that doesn't give you some real assurance that there are people out there really looking at these issues about the real insurance you need, then you need to come back and hear more. Right here on Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio. Streaming live from our studios here at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.